Hello there and welcome. Come right on in. I'm just enjoying a hot cup of coffee, just taking a little breather. So I decided to do a story time. And I'm going to do a story time on my experience with an out of body experience. I see a lot of people on YouTube doing this, and I was like, my experience wasn't like yours. So I thought I'd go ahead and share it. Now, this happened to me, I think around 2006, 2007. I was working at a radio station and I had a live remote broadcast. And all that means is that I was broadcasting live at a business. And I think I was at a car lot. And I was there along with the account executive because it was his client. And he had to be there. So we're setting up, we're talking. When I have downtime, he and we get into a personal conversation. Then he tells me that he's a Christian and he wanted me to read this specific chapter and verse in the Bible. And I told him that I would read it when I get home. And he said, you make sure that you read this. And I cannot remember the chapter or the verse or anything like that, but he did ask me to read this. I go home. I did not read it. I went on with my daily life, and then I got ready for bed, and then I went to bed and I went to sleep. But then I woke up around maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And that's when it gets interesting because that's when it happened. So I woke up and I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and read this Bible verse. I'm going to read this chapter that this guy wants me to read. So I went in my bedroom and I got my Bible. I came back out in the living room. And at the time I had a Papasan chair, so you know that was comfortable. I got my Bible. I crawled up in that chair and I found whatever it was he told me to read and I start reading. But that didn't last too long. I was about 30 seconds in, and that's when I felt my body start to float up. Now, let me just say, this was a great feeling. And I wasn't asleep, but the state that I was in, it was like, it was between, I don't know. I was conscious of what was going on, and I don't know if trance would be a great way to describe it, but I can tell you I was conscious and I wasn't asleep. But I began to float up. It was gentle. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't worried. In fact, I felt like I didn't have a care in the world. And I continued to float up. And I continued to float, but I didn't get to the ceiling. I didn't see a ceiling. But what I did see was a white room that I was in. The room was white. It had one window, and it had a purple curtain on the window. And that curtain was just blowing in the breeze. And I felt like I just did not want this experience to stop. So I continue to float up gently. And then I heard an audible voice in my left ear. It was a man's voice. It wasn't a deep voice. It wasn't a high-pitched voice. It was just a regular man's voice. And he said, say, I plead the blood of Jesus. Well, of course I didn't say that because I didn't want the experience to stop. So I continued to float up. And I continued to float yet again. And then I heard the audible voice for a second time. Still a man's voice, still in my left ear. But this time, the voice was more firm. And he said, Say, I plead the blood of Jesus. Say it. Say it now. I didn't do it. And I continued to float. But this time, something different happened. After he said it the second time, my eyelids started getting heavy, so much so that I could barely keep my eyes open. And as my eyelids were getting smaller and smaller, closing, everything around me turned black. So the room was just black at this point, except for that little part where my eyes were open. And I'm fighting it, trying to keep my eyes open. And my eyes were just closing. My eyelids were closing and closing until it was like a slither of light left. And that's when I said, I plead the blood of Jesus. Instantly, I was back. That's my story. I wasn't scared. I wasn't afraid. I loved it. I didn't want to come back. But my story is different, it seems like, than everyone else's. I've never heard anyone have a story even similar to this. But I do want to know if you've ever had an out-of-body experience. If so, let me know in the comments your experience. Was it like mine? Or was it like what you hear all over social media? Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I'm going to get back to my coffee and talk to you soon. Like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.